Today we're building this double stack planter using fir 1x6s. Normally any outside planters are built using cedar, but in our case this planter is going to reside under a covered patio, so we're not too worried about the elements affecting it. What you're going to need for this build is 8 tongue and groove 1x6s 8 feet long, 1 2x4, and some scrap plywood if you got it laying around. If you don't, just do what I did. Go to a construction site. They usually got a ton of waste laying around anyhow that they're willing to give away. I'll be building these planters individually. The tallest one's going to be 34 inches high, the smaller one's 17 high. For each planter box, you're going to need 12 1x6 boards. I'm cutting 12 boards at 17 inches long and 12 boards at 34 inches long. This will make up the sides for both boxes. With the 12 boards cut for each box, the next step is to separate 8 out of the 12 boards. 4 of them we want to cut the tongue off, and the other 4 cutting the groove off. Using a table saw is the easiest way to do this, and by setting the fence at 3/4 of an inch away from the blade, I'll be able to cut both the tongue and the groove on all 8 boards without readjusting the saw. Then just rinse and repeat for the other planter. Once you've done this step, you should have 24 boards, 8 without the tongue, 8 without the groove, and 8 that are still complete boards. The next step is to cut the trim moldings that will go around each box. Besides giving it a more modern look, these trim pieces will aid in keeping the 1x6s tight over time. Setting my table saw to cut 2-inch strips and using the remainder of the boards, I should end up with 28 2-inch by 18-inch pieces. 12 for the outside trim, and at the same time I figured I'd cut 16 more pieces for the supports inside the planters. Now on to assembly. Each side of each planter consists of 3 boards. 1 without the tongue, 1 without the groove, and 1 complete board. The board that still has both tongue and groove will be the middle board of each side. Then just add a board with no tongue on one side, a board with no groove on the other. Push them together so the tongue fits tight into the grooves. Continue the same process until you have 4 sides to make up the larger planter and 4 sides to make up the smaller planter. Each board has a rough side and a smooth side. I want the smooth side out, but this is personal preference, and I know some people might like it rough, so whatever floats your boat. I want the planting depth of each planter to be 12 inches deep. Again, personal preference, you could go 8, 10, 12, whatever you want. Measuring down 12 inches and then cutting the 2-inch blocks we cut earlier to the proper width will give me a base for each planter, as well as helping keep the sides together. One thing to note here is 2 of the side supports have to be cut shorter by 1.5 inches on each side. This should make sense once we start putting the sides together. At the same time, I'm also going to add the same 2-inch block setup border at the bottom of each planter to make up the base. I'm using a 1/2 inch plywood, as that's the plywood I was able to get hold of, so I'm securing the blocks a 1/2 inch up from the bottom. Make sure to space these blocks according to the thickness of the plywood you're using. With all the sides complete, I can start to put the boxes together. To make this go a little simpler, I'm using a square to get a perfect 90-degree angle on my work surface, and then from there screwing down 2 scrap pieces of wood to use as supports while I screw the sides together. It's a bit awkward to get the first 2 together, so I'm going to use 1.5 inch brad nails to temporarily hold it, and then once all 4 sides are together, I can pre-drill the holes and add 1.5 inch screws. And here you can see why I left the blocks 1.5 inches shy on 2 of the sides. I can now measure and cut 2 plywood bases for each box. Then just tap them down to our support blocks. Now if anything was to rot over time, it'd likely be these plywood bases, so for easy removal in the future, I won't be using any glue and only 1 screw per side. Then just flip it over and add the bottom plywood base. I went ahead and cut 16 2x4 pieces to act as feet on this design, well, because I like doing things the hard way. However, the easiest way would be to just cut 4 2x4 blocks for each base. Now all that's left to do on the build side of these planters is to add the outer 2-inch trim pieces. You should have 12 pieces left from the original batch cutting we did in the beginning. You can space these however you choose. I found the best look was to split them up evenly, and also I'll be connecting the 2 boxes together as one, so I want the trim pieces to line up together. The finish I'm using on these planters is an oil-based, semi-transparent, natural cedar color. I've never used this brand before, but it claimed to have a great UV protection built into it, so I thought I'd give it a try. I'm stapling black garbage bags into each planter and then adding gravel with a little bit of sand. And now I'll just hand it over to the expert and turn these planters into what they were built to be.